Hello, everybody. In this, the 21st session of our 10-week course on Gandhi and King, Soul Force and Social Change. Today, we finished the 7th week of our 10-week course. It has been a joy getting to know many of you, and I look forward to the relationships continuing well after this course finishes. Today's session, number 21, is relating to how Martin Luther King Jr. would implement his nonviolent resistance strategy of militant nonviolence. What are the guidelines for militant nonviolence? And so in my comments of 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes, I will outline verbally what we will see in a handout, guidelines for militant nonviolence, so that we can be relatively clear about what he is saying, how to organize. Then we will have breakout sessions because those have become very valuable in this course. We will see how many people we have at that point. We will have at least 2 breakout groups, maybe 3, maybe 10 breakout groups. Maybe we'll have 60 people showing up by then. Maybe not. The numbers are not important. In any case, then we will have time, each of us, to share in small groups. We'll come back to the group as a whole. And it seems that we have a tradition in recent sessions, after the recording is finished, to carry on, because some people want to talk, and get to know one another better by talking and sharing with one another. So the last 2 or 3 sessions, I believe, have continued for 20, 30, 40 minutes afterwards. And that is very late in India. Some of you are staying up way past my bedtime. I'm usually sleeping by 9 p.m. And in India, it is now 8:30. Our session is finished about 10 p.m. in India. And when you stay afterwards, well, let's just say, that is not something that I would do. I'm a morning person, not a night person. So we will carry on. I will discuss guidelines for nonviolence for Martin Luther King. We will have breakout sessions, and we will have discussion as you like. Always when I'm talking, which is too much, please interrupt me if you have questions, because always, in my view, when you have a question, it is better to ask before you forget it. Or if you have a strong feeling and you want to express it, it is good to express that feeling when you have it, because that, I think, encourages the sharing to be much more real. So I know many of you respect the lecturer and you don't want to interrupt. From my point of view, it is respecting me when you listen to what I want, and I want you to express yourselves when you feel like it. Okay? So let us begin. We are recording. And for those of you who are watching, again, welcome on a recording. This is for everyone. And this course has a total of at least 25 now active participants from 12 different countries. And you are blessed, if you're watching this recording, to see a tremendous multicultural gathering of people interested in nonviolent action. We can put up that first slide if you like. Harshal, King's Guidelines for Militant Nonviolence. It is good to be visual as well as auditory when you can be. And Kanaka is helping. Thank you, Kanaka. Good. I hope that you can, in your screen, blow this up. You can also, of course, screenshot it and save it. We can also share it in our WhatsApp group. When you look at the 12 guidelines for militant nonviolence, you will see that the three major categories are love, power, and justice. If we are to boil Martin Luther King's strategy for nonviolence down to three words, it is those three words. Whereas for Gandhi, it was truth, you might say love, and voluntary suffering. For King, it is love, power, and justice. We will repeat from previous sessions. For King, love without power is weak. Power without love is immoral, and you need to have both power and love to have justice. So under his guidelines for love, or nonviolence, we will see that for King, conduct of actions in a campaign may include secrecy. This is very un-Gandhian. Gandhi does not believe in secrecy. And so that is okay. They disagree. For King, this is practical. You don't want to let your opponent know ahead of time what you are doing, because they will use that against you. They may attack you. The Ku Klux Klan may attack the bus and burn it. I have a friend who is now no longer of this world, Jim Peck, who was a white man who was riding a Freedom Ride bus way back in the early 1950s. The Ku Klux Klan attacked that bus and burned it. My friend received brain damage and was in the hospital for over 2 months. Why did the Klan hit the bus? Because it had black and white people together crossing state lines. How do they know about the bus? Because it was the bus schedule was advertised ahead of time, and the Klan knew when the bus would be turning into Birmingham, Alabama. King and others would say, perhaps we shouldn't have given the schedule. It is better to protect our demonstrators, our nonviolent soldiers, to have some actions include secrecy. For King, original demands may be raised whenever one has the power to make it practical. Again, King believes in powerful love, nonviolent coercion, and so physical improvements in one's position relative to the opponent can be used to increase the demands. And demands can be lowered if you believe they were wrong or if they're no longer practical. So King has much more of a Western kind of American view that strategically you could increase your demands, you can decrease your demands based upon the relative coercive power at your disposal. And last, even though compromise should be allowed under some circumstances, bargaining is always in order. King was always willing to bargain. Again, this is very different from Gandhian satyagraha, that is, Gandhi's nonviolent action approach. For Gandhi, compromise on non-essentials may be permissible, but bargaining has no place. Gandhi would state his demands and then not change them unless they were seen to be wrong in the first place. He would not take advantage of increased power on his part to increase the demands. His approach was very un-Western. King's was much more in tune with a typical labor union organizing strategy. For King, you may have very high demands. Perhaps if it's a labor strike, you demand a $10 increase per hour, even though you really think that $4 is fair. And then you bargain down. That is typical in more Western binary culture, where you are always bargaining to get what you can. Gandhi is not of that sort of culture. And so let us keep that in mind. Bargaining has no place with Gandhi. Bargaining has a very central place for Martin Luther King. What about his views relating to power? As we look at that section, and here we're looking at Satyagraha on the slide, we can see that Gandhi always distinguishes between a person and a person's actions. If we put up the King slide on militant nonviolence, we can see that that guideline for Martin Luther King is not present. King does not distinguish between a person and the person's actions. He does, well, we're seeing all sorts of beautiful slides. There's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which we can discuss at some point. That is where Gandhi and King have a lot of agreement. And there is the guidelines for militant nonviolence. So for the power side of militant nonviolence, the militant side of militant nonviolence, King would say, number one, nonviolence, which may militantly and intentionally include physical coercion, is a tactical nonviolence strategy. It is a tactical strategy. Love must guide power. For King, the objective of power guided by love is to have a creative tension. You see that's in quote, but a creative tension. King wants to make the opponent feel very uncomfortable. So did Gandhi. But King wants the discomfort to be physical, not simply mental. I'll give you an example, which we'll discuss more next week. When King was campaigning in Chicago in 1966 for open housing, King decided to direct the militant nonviolent soldiers, his activists, into a suburb of Chicago called Cicero. Cicero was all white. As his marchers marched into Cicero outside of Chicago, King knew that he was going to provoke violence. He knew that. He wanted to create a tension, a physical tension. The marchers moving in where they were not wanted, he expected a response, and he got it. His marchers were hit with bricks. People were throwing rocks. Martin Luther King himself was hit on the head with a brick. And for King, this is just necessary. We need to create a tension so that people can see the injustice. Gandhi would do this too, but King was much more intentional about creating a physical tension. We can discuss the differences, but let us say that, second, nonviolence in thought and language towards all people is important, though while we must love our enemies, we are not obliged to like them. For King, he would distinguish, I love my enemy, I don't have to like him. Gandhi would not make these distinctions. He actually cultivated an active affection for the people that he opposed. He did not call them enemies. For King, there is an enemy. For Gandhi, he does not conceive of his opponents as enemies. Now, when we talk about thought and language, we discussed before with Gandhi, he would always distinguish between the person and the person's actions. King does not do that. Give an example, Michael. So once again, Gandhi would say to the white racist leader of the Transvaal government in South Africa, he would say, "Jan Smuts, you are my brother. Jan Smuts, your actions are racist. Your policies must be opposed." You notice that he would distinguish between Jan Smuts, the person, and Jan Smuts' actions, which are racist. King wouldn't do that. With King, loving the enemy means that he can still label the enemy as a racist. George Wallace, governor of Alabama, you are a racist. Your policies are racist. You are a racist. You must stop. We are actively opposing you. King's nonviolence would be very personal, and personal attacks were allowed. For Gandhi, this is not acceptable. For Gandhi, patience is required. Gandhi is extremely patient because he has a view of time that, of course, spans lifetimes. Gandhi believes in reincarnation. King would say, while patience is required, time is of the essence because our personalities can be harmed. And once again, for King, personality is what he would describe as his soul. The essential part of the person is the personality, and the personality can be harmed. King doesn't have the same view of soul as Gandhi does. King doesn't believe in personal immortality, let alone reincarnation. For King, we have only one life to live, and we must forcefully engage in change now, because our soul, that is our personality, can be harmed. So King was very impatient. It is rooted in his theology. It is rooted in his culture. I'm not saying it's wrong. It is just a reality. For King, you have only one life to live. For Gandhi, you have many lives to live, and life itself continues after your death. You, the essence of you, continue after your death. Regarding constructive program, King would say, constructive program activity is helpful to build a foundation for relationships and political networking from which more coercive actions can be launched. So King sees doing good work like having soup kitchens, free meals for children before they go to school, self-help programs within a community. He sees these things as all good that a servant leader should be involved in. But King is thinking of it strategically also. He is thinking, we are doing this in part because it makes us stronger and more cohesive to join together in great numbers when the time calls for resistance. Gandhi sees constructive program activity, building hospitals, educational institutions, improved clean water systems. These are all inherently good, and they're building the future society within the shell of the old. Gandhi does not see it primarily as a strategy for future nonviolent resistance. Gandhi sees constructive program activity as inherently good in itself, evolving the future that you want to see. King sees it far more strategically as a power base. And as we move a little bit then to justice, and you can see that I am moving along fast enough so that we will have good time for our interactions in breakout rooms. Justice for King, where love guides the power that human beings wield to bring about change. People have the power, not really God, because God has limited its power so that people can have free will. So the love of God and Jesus should inspire the power and guide the power that we wield as human beings to bring about justice. In doing that, we should use all available resources, unless to do so would violate your conscience. We welcome all people to actively participate and provide financial support whether they are directly affected or not. So King welcomes with open arms allies who join his march from Selma to Montgomery, allies in Congress that will help to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964, allies who will give money to the cause. He actively accepts and asks for money from labor unions, from various religious groups. Jewish organizations were very supportive of the civil rights movement under Martin Luther King. I'm not saying Jewish organizations from Israel. I'm talking about Jewish organizations in the United States, because they could see that the discrimination against Black people by white supremacists was very similar to the discrimination white supremacists would show towards Jews. And so they saw a common battle against white supremacy, and the Jewish Anti-Defamation League would support actively Martin Luther King Jr.'s struggles. Well, that all makes sense, doesn't it? Except, once again, Gandhi does not want a movement to be depending too much upon outside financial assistance. He does not want it to depend heavily upon the participation of people not directly affected by the injustice. Gandhi's strategy, his guidelines to bring about greater justice, is to convert the opponent, literally by your suffering. King doesn't see it that way. You notice that under his second guideline, under justice, he would say, we need to consistently reduce the amount of suffering to be endured by nonviolent activists. Accepting self-sacrifice as a painful reality to be minimized. So here is a significant difference. Gandhi sees voluntary suffering as a reflection of the love you have for your opponent as you seek truth and emerge together with the opponent in a common understanding of what is true. King already has a vision of truth, and he is trying to physically make his opponent see it and accept it, while at the same time minimize the suffering that the activists engage in. King is hit by a brick. He knows that there's going to be violence against him. He knows that he is risking his life every time he gives a sermon. Yet he is willing to accept physical protection. In the marches, he will accept police protection if they are usually federal marshals. He is willing to accept protection, even armed protection, for his demonstrators. Gandhi would not. A very, very different attitude towards suffering. King wants to minimize it. Gandhi wants to openly embrace it. He does not try to maximize suffering, but he openly embraces it when it comes. He does not try to avoid it. King tries to minimize it and, to some extent, avoid unnecessary suffering as he sees it. In fighting for justice, number 3, you can see in the guideline, we should intentionally take advantage of such weaknesses as your opponent may show. This makes a lot of sense in a Western liberal context. When your opponent is weak, that is the time to strike. You want to strategically maximize the coercive impact, and you may get more than you have asked for. As we will see next week, for example, in the 1963 Birmingham campaign to desegregate the downtown area of Birmingham, Alabama, Martin Luther King begins the demonstrations on Good Friday, the day before Easter. Why Good Friday? Because Good Friday was the second largest shopping weekend of the shopping year. He wanted to maximize the boycott and the physical impact of the demonstration, maximize the coercion. It was intentional to have the demonstration start on Good Friday before Easter. You take advantage of the opponent's weaknesses. You exploit them where they are most weak. Very un-Gandhian. Gandhi, even as we mentioned over a month ago in this course, would call off an entire campaign in South Africa, put it on hold when Jan Smuts, his opponent, was in a crisis due to railway strike workers closing down the government. Gandhi suspended the nonviolence campaign so as to not take advantage of the opponent's weakness. For King, that would make no sense. That is exactly when you should push harder, when the opponent is weak. So you can see the dynamics of satyagraha and militant nonviolence are very different. And last, not least, the role of government and law in social change for King is to be maximized. What do you mean, Michael? It means that you agitate to perhaps get a federal law passed, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Then you agitate to have the law physically enforced from the top down. That for King is practical. That will hopefully bring down barriers that separate people, which will allow the neighbors to get to know one another more effectively. You first coerce, change the structure of the relationships between black and white, or rich and poor, or whatever the divide may be. You break down the barriers, and then you allow people to see one another as brothers and sisters. You have to take down the walls, take down the fences first for King. Gandhi's approach is not top down. He tries to minimize coercion. His view of the role of law, as we saw, is more to evolve, and when the vast majority of society have come to agree that something like alcohol should be prohibited, then and only then is it good to have a law to prohibit alcohol. You don't agitate to have prohibition first, enforce it down from the top. For Gandhi, that is impractical. It will simply breed lawlessness. People will act as they did in the United States during the period of prohibition, and it will increase organized crime. People will find alcohol illegally. If you try to enforce a law against a very large, even minority of the population, for Gandhi, it simply will not work. It's impractical. It will breed resistance for the opponent, and you want to break that resistance for your long-term objective for Gandhi. For King, you pass the law, you enforce it down. That is the good thing to do. It is practical. To put it in a more sympathetic way, King did say, well, the law cannot make a person love me, but the law can stop them from lynching me. Lynching is putting a rope around the neck and killing the person by hanging them. Lynching was very, very commonplace for really over 80 years in the United States, from the 1870s well into the 1960s. Killing Black people, dragging them out of their homes in the night, and hanging them from a tree to terrorize the Black population was too common. From King's point of view, we need to pass anti-lynching laws, enforce those laws, so that anybody who engages in that behavior will be prosecuted and punished by the government. You cannot, the law cannot make you love me, but it can stop you from lynching me. For King, that is important, and it is part of the role of law. The law may not require for you to break my poverty, but it can require you to hire people in affirmative action programs so that they may be able to have work and gain skills. So King is actively willing to use the power of law and government to open up neighborhoods so that you can buy a house there where before you could not. He's not really opening up hearts by the law, but he's opening up the possibility of living together, taking down the walls and the barriers that divide us. So for King, the role of government and social change is central. If you don't have people in government that are policymakers now, then you need to organize and exercise the right to vote and expand the right to vote to elect people that will make those laws. And once the laws are in place, you enforce them. Even if there are a large number of people in society that will resist those laws, you need to enforce them down. For Gandhi, that is not the proper approach to bring. That is not the way to change people's hearts. For Gandhi, the way to change people's hearts is far more seeking truth, loving all people as yourself, and being willing to suffer the abuse of your opponent. From King's point of view, that's masochistic. That is foolishness. That is simply allowing yourself to be lynched and killed gets you nowhere except a grave. From King's experience, you need to force the opponent to stop being so violent. And that means coercive physical force, using the instruments of government against your opponent when you're able to. Now, I'm trying to be sympathetic to all sides here. I'm trying to help you see how Gandhi and King have very different guidelines for their nonviolent action approaches. Again, it's not that one is right, the other is wrong. They may both be right under different circumstances. They are just different, and we need to recognize the differences and not make the mistake of saying that Gandhi and King all believe the exact same thing, because they don't. They all believe in bringing about justice, but they have very different dynamic to their campaigns to bring out greater justice. To illustrate it again, Gandhi did say, "My objective is not to free India from under the British rifle. My objective is to free the British from behind the rifle." His approach is much more psychological. King would say, "My objective is to free African Americans from under the white supremacist rifle. And I'm willing to coerce and use physical force to stop those white supremacists from using their rifle. They may change their heart later. I hope so. But that's not my objective. I'm not trying to free them from behind the rifle. I'm trying to free the oppressed from being shot, from being lynched." So King is much more honestly siding with the poor to minimize their suffering. Gandhi is willing to embrace suffering and live with the poor in that process. At this point, I have talked too much, perhaps, and you have been listening, I think. I have not been interrupted. Would anyone like to say one or two words before we go into breakout sessions?